Hi everyone, this is Interviews Down Under coming from Melbourne, Australia, coming in from the States and coming in from the UK. Spencer Drate and Judith Salavetz with me. And Spencer, I'll give you the honours of introducing our fantastic guest today.
Thank you so much, Plastic. And I want to start off by saying this is part of our Designing for Music series that's going to be in the Rock Hall Archive collection. I want to introduce the co-hosts. We have Plastic EP, who's interviewed so many famous music people over the years. My co-partner, Judith Salavetz. We're in the Rock Hall Archives collections, three of them. We've designed for 26 Rock Hall inductees and nominated for the National Design Award, so forth and so on. And our guest tonight will be the famous one and only Nigel Grierson. And when we did our first book, Designing for Music in 1982, Nigel was profiled in that book. And at that time, there was a company called 23 Envelope, and he was a partner with the famous Vaughan Oliver designer. And anyway, we'll get into it. Judith, why don't you read the famous
Yeah,
Nigel
let me let
bio?
me let me go let me do this. So Nigel, welcome Nigel. We're
Hi,
so
Judith.
pleased to have you on our show. You're a genius. That's all I want to tell the people out there. So Nigel is a photographer, a filmmaker, and a designer. He was founding member of the photography design duo 23 Envelope, along with his then partner, another genius in design, Vaughan Oliver, designing album sleeves and other merchandise, primarily for the record label 4AD back in the 1980s. He has also directed many music videos, TV commercials, and currently publishes fine art photography books through his company, Lost Press. And Nigel, I saw one of your amazing books on sale on Amazon for $413. The photographs
Expensive,
are
isn't it?
absolutely gorgeous, but I thought, must
That's
be
nice.
very
Yeah,
special for that price.
yeah. It's obviously sold out by now. It must have.
We're going to go over some amazing packaging, the Nigel's. And what is interesting about Nigel, I find, he is a great photographer and he integrates his photography or art with his typography. So he's a very incredible designer in that sense of the viable things he works on. So let's start off with the first one, the famous one and only. He designed for the Cocteau Twins, uh, which should be nominated in the Rock Hall, by the way. Anyway, the first album, Garland's, 1982. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm starting with that one because it's the first album sleeve I ever designed. It was also the first album sleeve that the Cocteau Twins ever had. It was their first album, um, and it's at the time the Cocteau Twins had a kind of post-industrial feel about their music, slightly gothic edge, not quite like what we sort of think of the Cocteau Twins these days. And they sort of had that feel for the first two or three releases, but then changed to the sort of brighter, colourful thing that we know. Um, so this album, I really sort of I was I've always been inspired by Francis Bacon, which is partly why you have a lot of movement on some of my photographs.
Mm.
Um, and also for this one, it was influenced directly by The Scream by Edvard Munch. It's almost like a kind
Mhm.
of photographic, modern day photographic equivalent in that sense. As I said, the music had this post-industrial feel, so I was attracted to these buildings, which were obviously industrial, and I love the big sort of black open holes where the windows had been. That made me think of a human skull. It's some
Ah,
sort of sense of death, or after the event. So
oh.
that was the starting point for that.
Spencer, I was curious how the Cocteau Twins received that cover.
They liked it, but I think they like it less now because they see it as emphasizing a kind of gothic thing which they don't want to associate themselves with now.
Oh,
Mhm.
interesting.
I think they don't feel the same sort of warmth to the album as well, especially Robin, the guitar player, who writes a lot of the material. Yeah, I don't think he feels as warm to it as he did, and whereas fans, so many fans still sort of love those albums, and
So let's go into Lullabies, the next
yeah,
one, 1982. Tell us about that.
yeah, I included that one because it's I studied graphic design, and the first I did even sleeves, while I was a student, sort of trying out ideas like you do, often with graphics, really, textures, using photographs that that weren't even my own, like you might do, Spencer. So, but for this particular one, I mean, I spent a lot of time going into old antiquarian bookstores and collecting odd imagery from like medical books and things. But this particular book that I got these pictures from was an editor who had access, to a lot of images, photographs, because he had a magazine in the 1940s. This was, and he decided to put like pictures opposite each other that had a kind of visual connection, even though they were completely disparate images that had nothing to do with each other. He would link them together on opposite pages just because of a kind of visual connection, or maybe a conceptual one. It was really quite an interesting book, and I was always interested in that, even previous to that, because I like Ralph Gibson's work. I don't know if you know that photographer, but he referred to it as syntax when he would put up his images opposite each other on the same page that had this connection. So for that sleeve, I basically Xeroxed the images, color Xerox machine, and then also color Xerox of Japanese paper to use as a background.
Wow.
And I used the same logo that I designed for the other one, the first one, Garlands.
Yeah.
Carried that on, and we used that logo for about 3 or 4 sleeves before Vaughan then designed a new one. So yeah, that was Lullabies, but it had the same sort of dark atmosphere to that one. They hadn't become that sort of colourful band yet that we know them to have been.
So now we'll get into Head Over Heels. Now this is intricate packaging. It includes a poster, single, album, and inner bag. Yeah.
Head Over Heels. Yeah, it's Head Over Heels, and Sunburst and Snowblind is the single that came off that album. Quite often we would be designing the two at the same time, because that it would be the first single for sure off that album. Head Over Heels was like the first really release that was moving towards the Cocteau Twins that we sort of know and love now. But Robin, the guitar player, said that he wanted this one to be more abstract, which was music to my ears, to be honest. Well, if you don't mind the pun, he said that, and I thought, oh, that was like great. So our kind of initial reference point was a tracking shot from a Andrei Tarkovsky film where the camera tracks over water and with like different objects and things laid in the water. The thing about the shot is it's black and white, and this obviously wanted to be more colorful than that. And so we talked about maybe dropping ink and paints and things into the water. But I think at the end of the day, I took it a long way from any of those reference points, really. The way I worked was I just took all these paints and foliage and petals, flowers, all kinds of different things like that, and just worked for 3 or 4 days in the studio, building it up like a painter would do, really, and then sort of adding things, taking bits away, and then trashing it all and starting again. So got quite a bit of material out of it. We were kind of fairly happy with it at the time, and then Vaughan did some beautiful typography and things on the inner bags to just to finish it off nicely.
The next album would be Treasure, 1984, and again another intricate packaging, poster, inner bag, album, I guess album cover.
Yeah, well, the head over heels direction with the the coloured sort of feel of the inks and paints and so on, very painterly quality. We did that for like 3 or 4 sleeves, but in fact, the very first sleeve afterwards was, I think, Treasure. And for that one, we decided we'd sort of interpreted Treasure as treasure that you might find in an old attic or something like that, hence it's got the dressmaker's dummy there.
Yeah.
What happened was Vaughan had a friend who was a dressmaker, and we managed to borrow a lot of like materials off her for the shoot, which was nice. And they came to my house, in a cab kind of thing, and I had an empty room in my house at the time. It was only very small, but we used to hang the washing up in there. And there was this like one long washing line across the room. So I basically pegged the lace to the washing line and then pegged the curtain on the other side and put the dummy in the middle. And straight away it felt, the lace felt like that's how I've always interpreted it. It felt like an insect to me, like an insect's wings or something it became.
Yeah.
So that's what how that one came about. And we also printed on the reverse side of the board to keep the photograph very soft. We didn't want it to start and become really crisp, like and it would have looked a bit commercial, I think.
Yeah.
And that kind of kept it from doing so.
That's interesting. We talk about Judith and I would be designing covers. Sometimes we went on different fields, so reverse the board and print on the other side.
Yeah, it's nice to do that for the right job, isn't it?
Yeah, beautiful.
The next one, is Echoes in a Shallow Bay, 1985.
12-inch single, right? Yeah.
That's right, 12-inch single. Now, the reason I've included that one, apart from the fact I think it is a nice cover, a lot of people think Vaughan and I were like sort of twins or something, holding hands while we were designing things. And in fact, it wasn't like that at all. Often he was working on a different project than what I was. And when we talked about ideas, it was often mainly over the phone. When we were in the same space, we tended to sort of like party a lot and joke around and just have fun. This sleeve, however, was a moment where we were both in 4AD working on the project, and I was cutting up the photographs because we decided that for these painterly things, we would try to make them feel very different just through the presentation, the graphic presentation. So we were doing this split idea, and I was cutting the photographs up and putting them together to try and work out which ones worked best. And Vaughan was sort of looking over my shoulder, then going back to his drawing board, designing the logo. And there was just a moment where I said to him, "Look, I think I got the best combination here." And he just walked over with a big sheet of acetate with the logo he'd been doing, the calligraphy, and it just happened. It was just like perfect synchronicity between us, really. And that thing, how a lot of photographs can be great without type, and a lot of typography can look great without any image. But these feel totally independent to me, interdependent. You take one element away, and it's not the same thing at all. So I like that aspect of it.
The way Judith and I worked also is like it would almost cry out to us. Like we've had covers with no type on it. The famous Peter Saville "So" cover without the "So" on it is an example of the photograph, amazing black and white photograph with no type. And Judith and I did a Joan Jett cover with no type on it because the photograph dominated, and we said it just says to you, it cries out, right, Nigel? Sometimes no type.
Yeah. Well, even this Mortal Coil images, which we're going to come to soon, when they were later re-released, the Ivo, whose project it was, took all of the type off them, released them all with no type at all. So I personally do actually like typography on most things. I think it adds another layer, and I do like it myself. But anyway, the next one, the final one with the Cocteau Twins, is their collaboration with Harold Budd. Harold Budd's music, for those who might not know, felt quite similar to Brian Eno's ambient work. And they actually did, several albums together. But they did this collaboration with the Cocteau Twins, and later when the Cocteau Twins broke up, Harold and Robin, out of the band, sort of spent a lot of time working together, did quite a lot of albums together and things, until when Harold finally died. But so this cover, one of the advantages of working in-house is you get to know about records often well in advance the release date. So sometimes I would think, well, rather than kind of do all these visuals and try to explain what I'm going to do for the photography, why don't I just sort of go off this weekend and do some shots, what I'm intending, and show them actual images, either to go back again and perfect more, or they might be something in themselves. And that's sort of like how this one was done, where I was into the idea of thicket. Thicket is like in the finer branches of trees.
Yeah.
And when you look into that, it's just so abstract sometimes. It feels like a Jackson Pollock or something, So I did these pictures, and they didn't quite have the energy that I would have liked. And what happened as I was printing them in the darkroom, by mistake, I knocked the baseboard of the enlarger. So when I developed it, the print came up with like 2 images on it. And
oh, wow.
It was sort of like a feeling of almost like a vortex in a part of the print.
Yeah.
And I liked that and thought, well, this is more like what I'm after. So I went back to the baseboard, did some more prints, and each time I nudged the baseboard on purpose to create the same effect until I got that vortex right in the center of the image.
Unbelievable. Beautiful.
So that's how it came about. And the inner bag, I shot that the same day as I was doing another sleeve for Zymox. Because I did it after the other sleeve, and it was in the winter, from what I remember, there was very little light by the time I got to the beach to do the shots, because you can see it's kind of grass on a sand dune. But luckily, even though I only did like half a dozen shots, we were able to use one of them because it has quite a nice sort of calligraphic look about it,
And the album is called The Moon and the Melodies, right? In 1986, we're talking about, right? Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
And now we'll go to TMC. It'll end
in tears.
In tears, I'm sorry, 1984. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, This Mortal Coil is a sort of referred to sometimes as a supergroup, because in fact it was Ivo Watts Russell's concept. He's the founder of the label, and he had this idea that he would love to do like cover versions of songs from his past that he loved, whether it was Van Morrison or whoever else, and individual musicians from different bands within 4AD to play together, and even some people who weren't in. So it was basically a kind of shifting band. There was no constant there, other than Ivo himself. Now he wouldn't want to be on the sleeve, so I had these pictures. I actually took them 2 years earlier for the band Modern English, and although we all liked the photographs, it was felt it was the image was too powerful for them. It was too strong. The music was going in a slightly more pop direction. For This Mortal Coil, it was perfect. So that's what happened. Ivo said, could we use those photographs? And it was very easy from there on. I mean, Vaughan did some really nice complementary typography, and the inner bags are amazing. He set a sort of standard there really for the typography in our sleeves for future projects.
Yeah. So we get into Filigree and the Shadow. Anyway, you have the album, the poster, the CD, and the inner bag. That's a combo there.
Yeah, that was 1986. We decided, as I say, because of this constantly moving band, that we would use the model, Pallas Citron, she's called. We would use her as the sort of face of This Mortal Coil throughout all of the sleeves, even though she actually had nothing to do with it outside of that. And so I used the same model, and really, I mean, I'm not really interested in portraiture anyway, and it wouldn't have worked very well. So it was how to use her in a slightly more abstract way through light and composition. So I kept it to one side of the image in that respect. I actually felt like the poster was stronger than the sleeve itself. So when we came to do the CD for that, which was a little bit later, I actually used the photograph that we'd used for the poster. I actually used the same image and just cropped it very differently again, so she was to one side, rather like what the cover had been for the album itself. A beautiful inner bag, I think. We double printed things, you know. I used to sometimes, I mean, especially after this Mortal Coil album, the atmosphere that it had with this texture within it, I actually did a few sleeves where I would use double exposures to create that effect a little bit, like putting a texture behind the image. So, yeah, of course, this is before Photoshop, don't forget. So it meant I would have to put two negatives into the enlarger together to create those effects.
We'll go to black now. Everything's Coming Up Roses, 1987, 12-inch single.
Yep, another 12-inch. This one was for A&M Records. It was outside of 4AD. And I was working with John Warwicker, who you probably know. He later found a member of Tomato later. He was like the art director for Black, and he was the art director at A&M Records. We did a few jobs together for Black, actually. He basically he liked this Mortal Coil End in Tears images, and he sort of wondered if we could give Black a kind of, while doing a portrait of him, kind of give him a different kind of atmosphere, pull it away a little bit from the pop, because his music was slightly more pop than, say, the 4AD bands. So this is how it resulted, really, just with a reflection I used of a window that was in the studio where I was working, kind of over his face. But yeah, it was very enjoyable working with John, actually.
Great designer.
Yeah, definitely.
David Sylvain, our next one, with a lot of different things going on here. We got an album, 12-inch single, inner bag, and book also.
Yeah, basically, at the time that we did the Secrets of the Beehive album, I'd only recently moved to Greenwich, which is on the river in London, and I'd been spending months kind of like dragging things out of the river, you know, driftwood and all sorts of different objects. There was also another guy who had a, you know, like a metal detector kind of thing, who got some really interesting things, and he was selling some of them in Greenwich market. So I bought a few of those things as well. I explained to David that I was thinking of, because of this element of secrets of the Beehive, this idea of a kind of mystery. I came up with a thing about like flotsam on like a river bank or the sea, and the idea of all of these objects having a kind of history that we makes you wonder about them, a bit like a message in a bottle or something like that, you know, from somewhere else. When I explained it to David, he said, "Oh, that's interesting," because he said, "I sometimes write songs from that perspective of imagining a place that I've never actually been, and start, you know, using that as a starting point." So anyway, it came together. So for that sleeve, I reconstructed in the studio the idea of this flotsam, all these things, which is quite surreal in a way, because obviously they are things that you wouldn't normally or get all these things in the same space. That's the sort of slightly surreal element. I also put my cactus. I took the cactus out of a bowl I had and stuck that in the sand to add to that feel. But it's funny actually, because I remember the filmmaker Atom Egoyan, a Canadian director, saying that with his films he likes to take a premise, take a situation that's highly unlikely, but make through the way he directs it, make it believable. And it's a bit like that, a little bit like that sometimes, the way I sort of approach studio type images that are more from the imagination, you know.
Yeah.
Something that's unlikely, but somehow making it real. Whereas the Let the Happiness In is the single off it, and it's presenting the object in a very different way, of course, just on a white background. I mean, I'd started photographing some of them on white background, some of the objects, because I was thinking of it like doing an inventory of all of these different things that I'd found. I was fantasizing about doing a kind of installation at an art gallery or whatever, but when this project came up, I managed to sort of marry it into the project. And that's how it went. And this idea about photographing the objects on a white background, Vaughan said, well, let's use that on the inner bag as well. Let's use that as a concept. And then we also then carried that over to Trophies, which was a lyric book that David did only like a month or two afterwards. Actually, Russell Mills did the cover of that book. And when he found out that I was doing the photographs of all the different objects, he said, well, I've got quite a few objects like that. Do you want to use some of them? So he provided these tiny little stones. You see the image that almost looks like a tree with a little leaf falling. Well, they were these tiny little stones that he'd supplied. And I just decided to make it look like different seasons, you know, the leaves falling off the tree. And we then used that as for different chapter headings in the book, kind of going through the seasons, you know.
So let's move on. The sounds, way of life.
2023. We'd done a couple of sleeves for the sound back in the 1980s, and they didn't last much longer than that, actually, for various reasons. They broke up, but they were a really good band. One of those bands that, you know, are being reassessed now to a large degree. A lot of people saying, well, they were a really good band, you know. Anyway, they found some recordings that they'd not previously released, and decided to release them and got in touch with me. I really liked the title, actually. They wanted it written like in a colloquial way, no caps, just New Way of Life. It reminded me of, I don't know, it's probably the same for you when you're a kid. Do you remember like 60s catalogs, mail order catalogs, where there was all those sort of like domestic life in these catalogs? People, all kinds of new appliances for your kitchen and things for the garden. And all of the people always looked really happy in them, didn't they? They were always kind of looking very happy with this new way of life and all the mod cons. So and then I remembered this photograph that I took, you know, and it had a little bit of that feel about it for me, because everybody seems to be getting on with it. Everybody's, you know, enjoying the sun, and whether they're exercising or taking photographs or whatever. So that's how that one came about. And I should say that an important thing for me is the feeling of taking the inner bag out of the outer sleeve. It relates back to when I was a kid buying album sleeves, buying albums when I was like a teenager. That feeling of releasing the inner bag from within. And I think it's quite important that you get that feel right. And on this one, I put the white border on the image specifically for that reason, to kind of separate it from the inner bag, which because it was feeling all too much heavily the same kind of feel. Even though I'd given it the inner bag a very different color, it still wasn't separated. But for me, the white border just did it, you know. Yeah,
it really adds to that. The next one is Lisa Gerard.
Come Tenderness.
Come to 2024, and album vinyl with label inner bag. Tell us about that. Beautiful one.
I've worked with Lisa in the past because she used to be a 4AD artist. You know, she's always been one half of the band called Dead Can Dance as well. But they only split about a year or two back, actually, shortly after this record, I think. I nearly used that picture. I had that picture already, and I nearly used it for something else, and thankfully I didn't. I sent like 4 or 5 ideas off to Lisa, which I thought were all equally as good as the other, and all kind of fairly apt for what it was for. But she only had eyes for that one picture. She didn't refer to
Wow.
the others at all. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
that is my record sleeve. She would have strangled me, I think, if I'd refused it. So
Nigel, is that a
yeah,
4-color black and white or?
it was actually shot in color. Yeah, because it was digital.
Yeah.
But I had quite a heavy filters on it and things, so I took the color out, and then I ended up recoloring it again. You know, that kind of like split tone where you take the part of the picture towards like a blue, say, and you take the other lighter tones towards a green, and so you get what
So it was printed as a 4-color.
And it was printed as 4-color. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it has that this richness to it, you know, and it's got that bluish, greenish, moody tint to it. It's just lovely.
Yeah.
Almost you want to say it's delicious.
That's nice. Well, thank you. Yeah.
I want to say something. You and Vaughn seem to work on a very good chemistry. Judith and I have that. We really have exceptional chemistry, and I feel you had that with Vaughn, right? When you were working together, you seem to know what each other needs were, and you know what I mean? Like you said, you do this, I'll do this, you know what I mean? That's really great. I want to say to people, there's something about working with another person. If you can get that chemistry, if you're fortunate enough to have that chemistry, it just makes that design element so much more powerful, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think also in our case, we didn't actually spend that much time in the same space. You could say that someone gets on perfectly because they are in the same space and they connect so well. But you can also say someone really get on really well and connect because they can do that without being in the same space.
Right.
You see what I mean?
It's true.
And I think we were so tuned to each other, and we both knew a lot about the other one's discipline that it worked really well. There was a lot of trust in the other's ability, especially within their own particular discipline. You know,
that's what's supposed to happen. And then we'll final up here with the books. Your Lost Press, some wonderful books, visuals here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it was really something that just for doing my own photography books, and then I agreed to do my brother's photography books as well because he's a photographer too. His work is more sort of generally more documentary than mine, but yeah, it gives me a chance to do some design again, to be honest, because you know, obviously I'm designing the books covers too, but I hadn't really done any design until doing these last few sleeves I've done. I hadn't done any design. I'd focused, you know, for many years on directing and, you know, the TV commercials and videos. So it was nice to get back to it.
Nigel, I just want to ask you about your videos. I'd like to know which is your favorite video, which band was it, and if you can tell me the name of the video so everyone can see it.
Well, in a way, my videos split into 2 different directions. There were either a kind of reportage, filming things that were already there, almost like documentary kind of way, and the others were much more sort of fictional things that I created out of the imagination. So out of those 2 different directions, 2 of my favorites would be Rain Tree Crow, which was really the band Japan reformed. They called themselves Rain Tree Crow, and it was called Black Water. It's you know, David Sylvian again was the singer in Rain Tree Crow, and the other one, which is more sort of the documentary feel, is for Gary Kemp, who used to be in Spandau Ballet. He did a song called Inexperienced Man, and I did the video for that in New York, and it was really nice. We went into Harlem and all kinds of areas like that, and was just filming things on the street or going past in a van that we had all the gear in and things. It was a great experience in some of those New York locations, you know.
We're going to dedicate this interview to Vaughn Oliver in spirit. He was such a dynamic designer, worked with Nigel. They both really, again, put pieces together, gorgeous music packaging pieces together. And so I want to end up with that and thank Nigel for being on. Kind of like a retro play from the first book we did with Nigel being profiled, but in elaborate form right now. And thanks, Nigel, for being on.
Well, thank you very much for doing it. I really enjoyed it.